He's trolling the Securities Exchange Commission. This is what you do when you're the world's richest man and you're a bit eccentric and you've become Howard Hughes. He'll be saving his urine in no time. And the mission was always, how do we get economic identity to the billions of people who don't have it? Well, you build them a financial operating system that can handle their identity, their value, and give them a governance stack. So you don't need central actors to run everything. So when you actually follow that through logically, you say, well, hang on a second here. I have to build a system with billions of users, but no Microsoft or Apple or Google. Holy moly, that's hard. So we said, well, the first thing we have to solve is this idea that you bring more than you take. So, imagine like a potluck or, like something like that, where normally when you go to meet some family and friends, you would bring some food with you. And ideally, you'd bring as much or more food than the food you eat. So no matter how many people show up, there's always enough for people to eat. Right now, with all cryptocurrencies, it's the same amount of food. You're just adding more chairs around the table. So the more people who show up, the less food for everybody. That's not a sustainable system. And you're not going to get to the scale of millions to billions of users. Like we see with Ethereum right now in the gargantuan transaction fees. You move $1, you have to spend $50. It's crazy. And that's by design. It's not a bug or something. It's just how those protocols work. So building truly scalable protocols is a super hard thing because you have to admit adversaries, and you also have to admit that there's no centralized actor to optimize things. So we spent 6 years and 95 papers and lots of academic work to try to figure out what's possible and what's impossible. And a lot of it is a bit translating these massive systems that Google has built and others have built and asking, okay, well, how do we get what they've done but not have Google? These types of things. The other side of it is that once you have billions of people, they have to get along. So you need a management system to be able to kind of allow them to express themselves and vote and also pay for stuff as the system wants to upgrade. So you need a treasury system, you need a voting system, you need a governance system, a way of doing hard forks and so forth, because it's not going to work. You'll get to a certain point like Bitcoin where it's impossible to evolve behind a certain point. So you're just another checkpoint at that point, and then people leave you behind when the next generation comes out and then you're gone. And then finally, there are 8,000 cryptocurrencies. There's hundreds of legacy financial systems. You need to be interoperable. You need to have the ability to talk to all those systems. Could you imagine Wi-Fi if Wi-Fi was only constrained to the manufacturer? So like your Apple phone can only connect to an Apple router. Your Google phone can only connect to a Google router. Oh, it just wouldn't work. I mean, there's nothing humans agree on, but Wi-Fi is the one true religion. You can be in North Korea, you could be in Iran, you could be in Israel, you can be in Japan, South Korea, China, Russia, and the United States, and your phone can connect to the Wi-Fi in all those countries. It's truly extraordinary when you think about that geopolitically, that's the one true faith of humanity, that and Bluetooth that we've gotten. So you kind of need a Wi-Fi Bluetooth moment in finance, and you need something where regardless of what system you happen to live in, there's a way for your thing to talk to their things, and there's a bridge for that. So whatever the third generation of cryptocurrencies happen to be, it has to do those three things. Your users have to produce as much as they consume so you can sustainably grow to billions. You have to have a Wi-Fi moment where everything just works, and you have to have a governance system that means that when you get to that scale, you don't fragment apart and break apart into 1,000 pieces, or get to a certain point where you just simply can't grow anymore because the firm is too big, if that makes sense. And so we said, let's go do that. And if we do that well, then I'm going to have the cheapest, bestest protocol in the world for economic identity. And I could tangibly go to Ethiopia and all these places and say, hey, how do we get microfinance and microinsurance and these other things to run? It just so happens that that's also the best protocol for America and for the European Union and for China and for other places. And it's an open protocol. So rent-seeking people seeking profit will build on that system. So I get to have my cake and eat it too. I get to go and do my life mission and, go and play around in Africa and Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. But then other people get to use the exact same infrastructure to do their stuff. And a lot of that stuff will be Fortune 500 companies and so forth. And their success is my success. The things they build, I get to use. The things I build, they get to use. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I started with Bitcoin. And I left Bitcoin not because I was pushed out. I left Bitcoin because there was no way to use Bitcoin to do the things that I wanted to do. So I had to go and find, higher tides somewhere else. And then we did Ethereum. And then Ethereum can't do, and Vitalik Buterin himself is the first to admit it, because he's building Ethereum too. And Ethereum can't do the things that we need it to do. So we're all building a different thing. And then somebody's eventually going to get that thing. And then it's less important about the underlying infrastructure at that point. and it's far more important about the applications and the people. That's like, no one really cares about the web browser much anymore. They care a lot more about the website. They care a lot about the web application. I've never had Ether. I gave away all my Ether. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, and I gave it all to my secretary. I said, well, I don't know if this thing is going to be good or not. So when I was entitled to 293,000 Ether as a Ethereum founder. Wow. At the current price point, I think it's like 500 million. I try not to think about that number, Dave. It's like the multi-million-dollar Xbox. It's one of those things. So I did okay. So I've never had any Ether. I've had some Ether Classic. I bought some, and I have Ergo, and I have some Poly because I worked on Poly, and I have Bitcoin and ADA. Those are the cryptocurrencies. He's trolling the Securities Exchange Commission. This is what you do when you're the world's richest man and you're a bit eccentric and you've become Howard Hughes. He'll be saving his urine in no time. Actually, I've met Elon a few times. He used to come to my alma mater back before he was super rich and famous because he recruited aerospace engineers for SpaceX there. And his brother lives in Boulder. Basically, they took a position in Bitcoin. They couldn't go around and be like, yay, Bitcoin, Bitcoin's great, because maybe that's market manipulation, right? But if you say, hey, buy Dogecoin, which they don't hold and they have nothing to do with, how do you get Dogecoin? You buy some Bitcoin to buy your Dogecoin. So it actually manipulates the Bitcoin market by manipulating the Dogecoin market, especially for newcomers into the ecosystem. And when they get tired of Dogecoin, what do they sell it into? Bitcoin. They become Bitcoin holders. So if you're cynical, it was a very clever way to boost a thing that he already holds. But on the other hand, maybe he was just trying to prove a point that these markets are very malleable. Who knows? He's a weird guy in that respect. And he's a true genius, and they look at the world fundamentally differently than most people do. And discerning their motives is kind of like, finding what's funny to Charlie Chaplin. It'll be weird and surprising to you, and you're not funny at all. But somehow to him, it's the funniest joke in the world. So I have no idea. On the other hand, I think what he did do is convince Larry Ellison and a lot of these other guys to start taking Bitcoin into the treasuries of their companies. And Bitcoin is the gateway drug. It's the socially acceptable way. It's almost like the Catholic Church runs everything. So how do you find a way to be an atheist? So you become a church philosopher. And then you could talk about the nature of God. And then you're allowed to write arguments against the nature of God. But you're not an atheist, right? You're just talking around so you can come to the inevitable conclusion that God exists. So similarly, how do you get away from the dollar as a U.S. Fortune 500 company? Well, you buy some Bitcoin, but you're not getting away from the dollar. You're just diversifying your treasury, this type of a deal. So I think that's what we see happening. And it's a super bullish thing for our industry because the Treasury Department will not be able to regulate cryptocurrencies with a heavy hand, because anything they do to any of the cryptocurrencies will also impact Bitcoin. And if the Fortune 500s hold it, they own the government. They're just going to say no.